Up next, Sauman Cheng hosts a discussion of philosophical and ethical issues with her guests on The Open Forum.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Open Forum. I'm Sauman Cheng, your host. With us today we have Mr. Seehafer, Humanities Department Head and teacher, Senator of Public Relations, Jodie Chan, and the Senator of Student Life, Barton Liang. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the topic today that we will be discussing on the Open Forum is 2012, the year of elections. Just to give a bit of background on this topic, this year over 59 countries will be holding some form of election, parliamentary, legislative, presidential, and that's about a third of all nations in the world. These changes could, added together, affect 53% of the world's population and around the same amount of the world's GDP. Of the 5 permanent Security Council members, the United Kingdom is the only country that will not have some change in national leadership this year. And together, the rest of these nations, Russia, China, France, and the United States, of course I would forget that one, together make up 40% of the world's GDP. So as everyone can see, this is quite a significant year for everyone. We've already seen the elections in Taiwan and Hong Kong itself. We are about to have our chief executive elections, air quotes. So, Mr. Seehafer, what as a teacher of history and also an avid current events reader, what do you have to say on this topic?
I didn't realize it was 59 countries and that many people involved. I knew the big countries in terms of the big 4 out of the 5 national security you mentioned. And I follow American politics very closely, so that's the one I'm obviously the most interested in. But that being said, I think it says something about the collapse of communism and the move towards democracy worldwide, the fact that so many countries are holding so many elections. And even though, yes, Hong Kong is a pseudo-democracy, I still find it interesting. And I would argue that in the long run, I still think that Hong Kong will impact China more than the other way around, both economically and hopefully politically. It's really interesting what's happening in China right now. But even on a local level, they do have some types of democratic elections in villages and whatnot. So I think the world definitely is headed in that direction, and people are having more of a say in terms of politics. Economics, I think, probably is a little bit different issue. But yeah, it's an exciting year. We'll see what happens, particularly in the U.S. this fall. I think it'll be interesting to see. It looks like Romney will be the Republican nominee. And
Yes, it does look like that.
so we'll see what happens.
I mean, Barton, any comment perhaps on the U.S. election?
The U.S. election. Well, honestly, I'm hoping Santorum gets the nomination for the Republicans, just because that gives Obama a better chance because of how ridiculous Santorum is. But, that's just me speaking as a liberal Democrat supporting person.
Unfortunately, the news has just come out that Mitt Romney has run the
Illinois. Yeah, that came out a couple
primary.
hours ago.
Apologies.
Well, that's his relative, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But, I'm hoping that Obama gets reelected for next year.
No, I
For his
really
next
think,
term,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think continuation of government is actually really important, especially when it takes so much time to get bills passed or any ideas actually spread out to the public, and having governments, support and vice versa. So I think it'd be really great. I support Obama as well. I mean, given that he's going to bring that continuation, and I feel like change is going to happen.
So perhaps bringing the discussion back home, where whether democracy is existent is more of a debate. I mean, does everyone feel that democracy is on the rise, or is this merely the appearance of democracy? I mean, how much of what we're seeing now is a lot of elections going on is really a manifestation of the common person is having more say in what happens in the nation? I mean,
You take a look at the Arab Spring, it's a year on. I mean, that's everyone trying,
it's true.
a whole
It's very
region of
true.
people trying to break out and have more of a voice and more of a say. I think it's a universal human desire for people to have control or say over their lives, whether it's children over their parents or teachers and administrators at a school or students and teachers. They all want to feel respected and like they're part of the decision process. So I think that naturally humans will dictate that that's the direction they'll want to go to. Whether the people with power and arms allow them to do that is a different question.
Yes, that is very true. So perhaps a more relevant question to us would be, is that a form of government that we think is feasible and that we want? Everyone naturally wants democracy. I think everyone accepts that, but is democracy a form of government that we want to advocate? Perhaps not just in government, but in other institutions, for example, or a school itself.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, like Mr. Seehafer said, everyone wants to be part of the decision-making process because at the end, any decision that's made ultimately does involve you, and you don't want to not be able to have any say, right? Like, and I guess historically, if you look, the United States is, I think, the longest-running sort of political regime in the world, and it's been running on the same sort of core values of American-style democracy for the last 200 plus years, and it's worked out pretty well. Like, they've been continuous. They've always had support of their people, more or less, and so yeah, I mean, clearly from examples throughout history, we've seen that democracy is more supported by the people, more likely to last than, say, a totalitarian regime.
That is a good argument. Does anyone have perhaps an opposing opinion to that? No.
I wouldn't oppose democracy, but I mean, it is yes, you look at the American example, it is the longest lasting and its oldest, model of democracy in the modern sense that we know, and that, yes, it has lasted and it has spread, but it's very messy.
Yes, definitely.
It's very inefficient. Sure. I mean, if you have a dictatorship or a small group of people, leading a country, it's very easy to make decisions. I mean, you look at China. When you run the Olympics, you want to get venues built, it gets done.
Yeah,
not only because you have a huge workforce, because they set policies and they have monetary policy and political control, and it's just very easy to get things done. So I guess that's sort of the trade-off is, you do have all your voices heard, but even on a school scale, teachers want to have say in policies, students want to have say in their student life. That takes time, and it takes meeting, it takes efforts, and it's not efficient. It's not time efficient, but ultimately, I think better decisions are made in the long run.
Well, that being said, I also think that achieving democracy is a process that can actually go very wrong. I mean, you have places like in the Arab Spring who are in limbo right now because you do not know who will lead the best, the country towards democracy. And even though you're on the way there, it's not very sure whether you'll achieve it or not.
Yeah, like Egypt's an example.
Yeah, exactly.
So as perhaps two senators on our only democratic elected body on the school grounds, what do our two senators feel about democracy in our school, like the Senate itself? How much of an impact does the Senate make? Is it just a facade, or do you feel do you feel you're making a difference, so to speak, in the school?
Well, I mean, because at least the Senate Exco has such individualized roles, we have such specific roles, I feel like we are making a difference, perhaps not specifically because we're a democratically elected sort of group, but because we're each assigned to a different sort of section of the school's, I guess, the running of the school, we're able to notice a lot more issues and make changes that we have to. For example, I know Jodie's been writing in Junto just to keep the student body updated on Senate events and stuff like that, and the decisions that we're making. And I know I've been working with Ms. Fine, as well as Vivian, the Senator of Service, to really revamp the way club leadership transitions work. And so, I guess on that front, we have been making a lot of difference, but I don't think a lot of the students notice it so much.
And a lot of the time, even though we do put in the efforts, we have new initiatives, such as the Senate website, which a lot of people don't know is in existence. I feel like the efforts made is what the student body actually votes for, as opposed to just maintaining the roles previously held by past Senate Exco. Does that make sense?
Teacher, do you have any?
Well, I think it's easy to be cynical and look on the outside and say, well, you don't really have any power, because ultimately if an administrator deems something, inappropriate, or, they don't want that policy to go that way, they can put their foot down at any point, because technically you don't have any power. But ultimately, it's much better to be in part of the conversation and be, forming policy, and you're lucky that you do have administration and teachers that respect you and are open to ideas and suggestions. So positive things do come out of it. So I think is it ideal? No, of course not, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's fair enough. The next question perhaps to ask is, do you feel, because a lot of times one of the arguments against democracy is that the people who have a vote don't necessarily know very much and perhaps aren't making a good educated vote. And I feel that in school that's perhaps oftentimes a very good argument because, what do we know about the next candidates that come up? Almost nothing. Do you feel perhaps is democracy an effective way to elect student leaders, or perhaps we should be appointing leaders
I believe it's better than the alternative of just appointing someone. I feel like everyone should have the chance to represent themselves, even if they might have the ability to say, I don't know, for student life. If he wasn't very outgoing, which Barton is, by the way, but theoretically speaking,
Yes.
if he wasn't very outgoing, not many people knew him, but he had the great abilities to lead for student life, he would still be a very great candidate for the position. So I feel like that's the best way to go.
I mean, I guess, like, aside from Senate itself, like for student clubs and things like that, I know a lot of club members would prefer having elected leaders than simply appointed ones, or the ones that like apply and by some unknown process are presented as next year's leaders. And part of it is that students want a sense of control, right? They want to be able to say that, like, yeah, we were a part of making this decision, and ultimately with that, I think they'll be more supportive of the person who is elected than someone who's appointed and then sort of imposed upon them.
Yet, at the same time, do you think, I mean, if you were to appoint the next senator of student life, would you not be able to find a more effective person to manage a job than perhaps someone who was elected basically based on, I mean, one speech, and I mean that's no indication of anything.
I think potentially I could, like, say if I were to appoint my successor, potentially I could find someone who would be able to, fulfill the roles. But ultimately, because the student body's not involved in the decision, I don't see how, or they might not get the support that, say, I've gotten or previous elected student leaders have gotten. And that's a big part of it, because for Senate, what we do requires the students to support us, and it requires the students to be able to interact with us and tell us their concerns and stuff. And if there's simply an appointed person, they might not feel as open or as comfortable talking to them about their opinions, as in, like, the student body might not feel as comfortable as, say, if they were the ones who put that person in office and that person had a direct obligation to the students.
If you're concerned about people, not making wise decisions and maybe making it based upon, like, popularity contests, is that what I hear? Potentially?
Or maybe just the fact that it might not be like an intentional popularity thing, but just that, I mean, the average student does not know very much of the candidates. Basically nothing, we can
right,
say.
So they're basing it upon the speech
Yes.
and the cheers.
Yes.
Would it be possible to create a system, and I was just thinking about this as I was listening to you guys, where part of the vote is based upon what the student vote is, and the other part of the vote is based upon teacher vote? People have taught or interacted with, those students on different levels, whether it's through a club or a sport or in the classroom, because they may at times, and usually I think they would pretty much agree this kid is a great kid, really qualified, they would do a good job. But sometimes they would, teachers would see through, the popularity contest part of it and say, this kid really isn't that responsible. Maybe wouldn't be the best leader for the school.
That's a good idea. I mean, it gives the candidate more credibility.
Yeah, I think that idea is definitely very valid. Like, it would give very good results. But then again, like, I guess ideologically, the Senate is supposed to be elected by the student body, and we're only responsible to the student body. And if the teachers are a part in selecting us, then we also have it turns into the Senate also having an obligation to teachers to, I guess, like, enact or come up with policies that fit what the teachers want as well. Just because, the faculty have played a part in putting us in office.
Point, yeah.
So I guess that's a bit of a conflict of interest, although I do know that most teachers would pick very, like, qualified and very good candidates for these positions. I just don't think ideologically it'll work.
Right.
Yeah.
When you think about it, the election process here is such a short, like, period of time. You can't really. I feel like the idea that, even though we might have to make adjustments, I feel like that's a really good way to, choose a candidate. And then have teachers involved as well. Sorry, I'm not speaking very loudly. But yeah.
I mean, what do you think, Seehafer, as an unusually elected official yourself? I mean, do you feel the fact that you're elected makes a difference? Because most, even faculty leaders across the school are not elected. I mean, democracy is not. I understand why, but it is not a huge part of how you run a school.